Dr. Jo Grace, and I was just listening to the news and they were talking about the wearing of sound cancelling headphones being bad for your hearing. And I'm just aware that if you are somebody who wears sound cancelling headphones or noise cancelling earphones, or if you're a parent of a child who might need to wear those, that today you're probably feeling a little bit more vulnerable in wearing them, or a little bit more uncertain as to how to support your child. And I just wanted to pop up and say it's a lot more nuanced than the simplified report of these things are bad for your hearing. It's to do with the development of the senses, and that's something that I talk about on the Supersensory Lexicon. It's something that I wrote about in my book Sensory Being for Sensory Beings, and if you want to know a little bit more about it, I'm going to keep chatting for another couple of minutes, and you're welcome, if you're on the short version of this film, to click the link and listen to the long version. But essentially, sensing is a two-part process. You have to have receptor organs that work, or work to some degree, and you have to have a brain that's making sense of the information from those receptor organs. And we tend to only think about the first part. So a little child is born, they've got eyes that can see, and we think of them as sighted. A little child is born, they've got ears that can hear, and we think of them as hearing. But actually it's about 25% receptor organ, 75% backstage in the brain. If your brain is receiving the information from your receptor organs, so we're talking about hearing today, if your brain is receiving information from hearing, then it can begin to learn to process that information. And what this research is saying is that if you don't give it that information, how can it ever learn to process it? What they are not saying in the news reports that I've been hearing is that there is a sequence to that learning. So there are things that it is easy to learn to hear, and there are things that it is hard to learn to hear. And everybody learns at different rates. Humans are wildly variable. You know, we're hugely diverse in all aspects of our, bodies, our brains, our, everything about us. We know that we're not the same as one another. And so people learn in different ways. If I give you an example that makes it more tangible, if you think about maths, if I wanted to teach you advanced algebra, I wouldn't start out by teaching you advanced algebra. I'd start out by teaching you to count, by teaching you to add, by teaching you to multiply, and I would step you up through it like that. And you're far more likely to be able to learn advanced algebra if I step you through it in that order. If I just start out with advanced algebra, you will really struggle. And for some people, that filtering of background noise is more on the advanced algebra level of things. And if you want them to be able to do it, they need to do the start out stuff first, and actually taking away the pressure to imagine if, whilst I was trying to teach you to count, I threw in bits of advanced algebra. Like, it wouldn't speed up your learning to count. It wouldn't speed up your learning advanced algebra. It would just muddle things early on. So for some people, the wearing of sound cancelling headphones can allow them to focus on learning and developing the parts of hearing that they're currently, progressing through. And if you are wearing them, you can think about times when it would be suitable for you to not wear them, so that you can, imagine you've done the adding lesson and then the teacher says, oh, and there is this stuff called algebra, imagine that. So you can invite the curiosity further along by having periods of time when you don't wear them. But for some people, wearing them will enable them to focus on the parts of their development that they're currently exploring. And the other thing is, if you think about that child who's learning to count, learning to add, because one day there'll be an advanced mathematician doing algebra with letters and imaginary numbers and things like this. If when they were learning to count, say something awful happened in their lives, a family bereavement, a beloved pet dying, they would be less able to learn to count in those times. Or if, when they were learning to count, there was a circus performing outside, they would be less able to learn to count. And for people who have neurodivergent brains, for people who have senses that process information in a different way, there can be other things to deal with before you can focus on the kind of core aspects of learning to use your senses. It's like there's a hidden curriculum. And I remember a young autistic man, talking about his inability to learn his literacy and numeracy skills when he was at school, because he was so busy coping with the rest of his life. And he said it's like trying to teach a soldier to knit in a war zone. Like, it was a skill I was perfectly capable of learning, but at that time the school environment for me was so much that I had to learn to cope with that first before I could learn my maths and literacy skills. And he is now a very literate, numerate, very capable adult. And when I work in schools all around the UK, and when I meet young people who are wearing sound cancelling headphones, oftentimes it's as they start at school, or as they change schools, change classrooms, or when other things are going on in their life, and they're doing a very sensible thing. They're going, this is all a bit much at the moment, I can't do all of this, here's an aspect of this that I can remove that makes the rest of this more manageable. And if I take that away from you, there's such a real risk that I overload you, and then you express that overload through distress, through school refusal, through self-harm, through behaviours that affect other people's learning or affect other people's, physical safety. And so it's really, I just wanted to, I could keep talking about this all day, but I'll get to where I'm driving to very soon, so I won't. But I just really wanted to stand beside the community of people who use sound cancelling devices, who use headphones that, cancel out background noise, and say it's not so simple as that doing those things harms your hearing. Yes, if you put sound cancelling headphones on a little baby, if you put noise reducing earplugs in a little baby, they wouldn't be able to learn to hear, because you need access to those sounds in order for your brain to learn to understand them. But it is a much, much more nuanced thing than that, and there are many valid reasons and many useful reasons why people would be wearing them and should be wearing them. So if that's you, not everybody looking at you today is thinking, whoa, they shouldn't have those headphones on.